The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
All those pandemic puppies and kittens are now dogs and cats. Are there enough veterinarians to care for them? We'll check in on that tonight. Then a roundup with our Ontario Hub's journalists on the stories that stuck with them this year, and from the government's handling of pandemic relief spending to how food habits have shifted amid COVID-19, we've got the Agenda's Week in Review. It's Friday, December 17th, and that's ahead on the agenda. In the depths of this pandemic, the demand for furry friends of all kinds skyrocketed. Now, as the proud owners of those pets settle into caring for their animals over the long haul, many are having trouble finding a vet. What's going on? Let's ask. In Guelph, Ontario, Jeffrey Wichtel, professor and dean of the Ontario Veterinary College at the University of Guelph, and in Ajax, Ontario, Karen Jones, veterinarian and practice owner at Ajax Animal Hospital and Rehabilitation. Welcome to you both.
Hi there.
Hi. As I was saying before we started taping, I have a pandemic puppy, and so I'm looking forward to this conversation. Let's start our conversation by looking at a 2020 survey by the Canadian Veterinary Medical Association. In it, they warned that even before the pandemic, demand for veterinary services currently exceeds or will soon exceed capacity at a national level. Half of the clinics in the country, the survey said, are looking to hire a new veterinarian, and half are looking to hire a new veterinary technician. With the average looking to hire 1.4 veterinarians and 1.8 veterinary technicians, many veterinarians indicate open positions take more than 6 months to fill. Jeffrey, I'd like to start with you. That report used the term veterinary supply crisis. How would you characterize it?
Well, thanks. Yes, I do agree with that characterization. It was probably back in 2017 when we first saw this uptick in the demand for veterinary professionals, and it has only gotten more severe over that time. Currently, here in Ontario, I would say that our veterinarians' wanted ads are running at about 5 times historic averages pre-2017.
That's a huge number.
Yeah.
And Karen, you know, we've been hearing a lot of stories of people looking for pets because we needed to cope during this pandemic. Rescues are running out of animals to put into homes. In terms of demands on your practice, what has your experience been like during the pandemic?
I think I would absolutely agree with the fact that the pets have helped all of us get through this pandemic. I think that people have really been relying on the companionship when they've been in their homes. So I think that, involving pets in our lives is a really special bond, and we absolutely support that. It has, however, been unprecedented. In our practice, we've seen a 75% increase in the number of puppies and kittens in 2020, and in 2021 it's been a 78% increase in the number of new puppies and kittens since 2019. We're literally talking about hundreds in our practice of 6 veterinarians.
And I'm sure, too, doing what you do, you want to help families. How do you feel when you have to tell a family that you don't have the capacity to take their animal on?
Well, it's very difficult, and I think that the hard part is that often falls, that job falls on the shoulders of our receptionists, our assistants, and our technicians. They're the gatekeepers for the veterinarians in our practice, and they quite often have to, deal with people who may be frustrated or upset in that situation, having difficulty finding access, or at least accessing veterinary care right now.
And Jeffrey, we've heard about the pandemic pets, as they're being called. Do you have any sense of what else is driving this demand?
Well, I think there's been a societal trend for a more intense relationship with our animals. It started well before the pandemic, but certainly the pandemic has put a spotlight on that. So I think I'll see if Karen agrees, but I think our modern pet owner is much better informed and really intend on doing the very best they can for their animal. And this is true for horse owners and farm animal owners as well. And so I think we are seeing an uptick in demand for veterinary services, not just because of more animals, but because expectations are higher around the health of our animals. I think we expect the same for our animals as we expect for ourselves and our family members.
Why do you think that expectation has changed?
Well, I think it's been a gradual change over the decades in terms of how we see animals and our relationship to animals and the obligations that we feel to care for our animals. If we're going to keep animals in our home, we do consider them like family members. And having two veterinarian daughters myself, I understand that this generation of veterinarians also feels very close, not just to their own animals, but to their clients' animals. So the emotional toll involved in negotiating veterinary services under these difficult situations that we've experienced lately affects both the clients and, of course, the veterinarians and the whole healthcare team.
Karen, is there a social trend towards taking pet ownership more seriously and making more visits to the vet?
I think that's absolutely the case. A couple of driving factors behind that, I think, are the fact that we do have access to much more comprehensive care for pets. We're looking at trying to be proactive on the preventive care side, and so that involves more touch points with the clients and the pets over the course of a year. I think the other thing is that people are doing a really good job of looking after their pets. They're living longer, and in that, they're then able to develop diseases of aging that can involve quite intricate care. So, we definitely do see our clients quite often, and that builds a very strong bond between the veterinarian, the pet, and the client.
I can tell you that our puppy Zoe has a very nice bed and many, many toys to choose from, just to build on what you were just saying. Jeffrey, what does this shortage of vets mean for pets in the province, for those people who can't find a veterinarian?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the blessings, but perhaps the curse as well, is that veterinarians by their nature are very committed to offering care where it's needed. There's no doubt that clients, and I've received many calls and letters to this effect, are finding it harder sometimes to find veterinarians willing to offer care, and whereas they could go to their local veterinary clinic some years ago and be assured of being seen in a timely way, sometimes they have to call several clinics before they get in. Emergency care has also ballooned, and all of the emergency hospitals in our region anyway are overtaxed, including our own at the Ontario Veterinary College. To the point where, sometimes there are no stalls or cages available. And this is a pretty typical situation. So it's led to a degree of frustration, but also a commitment to make sure animals are seen. But the downside of that, of course, is burnout and fatigue, and only made worse by the way in which care has had to be offered through COVID. And, I think Karen could speak to that. It can be quite trying. Working in a curbside situation, especially around end-of-life decisions, and that sort of palliative care situation can be very emotionally draining for all parties involved.
Karen?
Yes, I think the beginning of the pandemic, when we started with the initial shutdown, we were limited as companion animal hospitals in the province to providing critical care only, so that really for a 2-month period pushed off all of the preventive care and regular care that we would be providing for our patients. And we're still working on trying to catch up with that, in addition to the number of increased, the new pets, the new puppies, the new kittens. So yeah, it's challenging. We are not, as a profession, the type of people that would ever want to say no to caring for an animal. And I think that the difficulty, as Jeff mentioned, with respect to curbside medicine, it allowed us to continue to practice and to care for the pets through the pandemic and do our best to try to keep our team members safe. so that we're able to continue to provide that care. But we were faced with the same issues that any other workplace was. We have staff members who needed to be at home with children during the school, homeschooling. We've had people that have had to deal with self-isolation. So, staff numbers have been down. But I think the difficulty with any type of hospital is you don't necessarily know what's happening behind the scenes. And so that can set up for some conflict, because it may look like, well, why don't you just say yes? Why don't you take on that other pet? Why don't you bring in that other animal? And, if the veterinarians are currently engaged caring for the pets that are currently in the practice, you can't take another patient and do a good job and an appropriate job. So it sets us up to, often feel like we're not good enough, and we tend to do that to ourselves anyway.
I'll just add that you all have been doing a great job with our puppy. We went to the local clinic. Our puppy, because this curbside you were mentioning, someone came out, took our puppy inside. We waited in the car, and then they brought our puppy back. I just wanted to say we appreciate the work that you're doing. Jeffrey did mention burnout, and you were just talking a little bit about that. We're already talking about a shortage of vets in the province. Karen, what concerns you moving forward if people in your profession, your colleagues in your profession, are experiencing burnout?
Yeah, I think that things like what you're doing here is helpful. I think we need to share the fact that we're at a crossroads right now. I think that going forward, we always want to work with our clients, with the pet families as a team. And I think that it's important to recognize that there are stressors on both sides of that team equation. And, we've had some really incredible support from many of our clients, and we need to try to rely on the good feelings that brings. And I appreciate you already talking about the good relationship you've been able to have with your veterinary hospital so far. But it's hard. It's hard. Trying to do the job of two veterinarians at once is not easy. We're a good team practice, so we help to share the burden a little bit that way. But I know that there are some solo practitioners out there that are, really feeling, at their end. And I'm worried that this will lead people to decide that to be able to maintain some sort of work-life balance, they're going to have to step away.
And Jeffrey, we talked about this shortage happening before the pandemic, and the pandemic has put a spotlight on so many issues within our society. Are you worried that more vets are going to leave the profession because of everything that's happened in the pandemic?
Absolutely. I would say retention is our number one concern. It's a symptom rather than a problem, of a larger issue that we need to deal with. So there's a lot of discussion, a lot of activity around trying to help veterinarians and technicians cope, to help practices offer health care in a more efficient way, because to be honest, it's we can't turn around the number of graduating veterinarians and technicians quickly, right? The technicians, it takes 2 years. For veterinarians, it's 4 years after their undergrad. So we are going to have to really think carefully about how we engage with our healthcare professionals and help them through this, so that their work-life balance can be manageable.
And Karen, are you seeing colleagues leaving the profession altogether?
Yes, I think that has happened. I see people needing to step back. I think that's happening as well, where they're just not able to maintain the hours and the pace that they may have previously. So yeah, that is happening.
When we talk about moving forward and finding solutions, what can some of the things be done to fix these shortages? Karen, I'll start with you.
the education leaders like Jeff at the vet college to reflect on what the actual demand in the province is right now. I think that we need to look at the role of veterinary technicians in practice, and perhaps consider as a kind of regulatory issue what more the veterinary technicians can do in our practice. I'm picturing something in the region of like a veterinary technician practitioner, like our nurse practitioners that we see that can look after some of the wellness care. I think that's something that would be helpful.
And Jeffrey, I know that the education is required for a certain amount of years, so you can't really fast track that. What else can be done to fix these shortages?
Well, I agree with Karen that there's a lot of discussion, very fruitful discussion around better utilization of technicians in practice. And I think broadly it's supported by veterinarians and technicians themselves. But there might be a regulatory obstacle, but also perhaps a bit of a cultural change. Veterinarians are problem solvers. They like to do things themselves. So they have to let go a little bit sometimes. But more than that, I think COVID has shown us and accelerated our adoption of technology. It's not going to be the whole solution, but it might be helpful. So certainly in our own hospital and in many across the province, we're making better use of telehealth and telemedicine services to triage cases and sometimes assist clients that are worried about the welfare of their animal, help them with that decision as to whether they really need to bring it in, whether they need to bring it in tonight or whether tomorrow is good enough or something that they can do at home. So these kind of technological solutions certainly have been adopted with great rapidity during COVID, and I think we'll keep them once the pandemic is over.
And Jeffrey, according to the CVMA, the Canadian Veterinary Medical Association, Canadian veterinary colleges are graduating veterinarians at a rate currently equal to retirement. Are you planning to increase the number of graduates for your veterinarian program at the University of Guelph?
We are. We're right in the middle of discussion, and we will likely make changes to the next round of admissions. Yes.
And the government provides funding for each spot. Will they increase funding for new spots?
That's something that we would very much like to engage government on. I think to some degree, as you might know, in higher education, we are locked into an enrollment corridor at the moment, and yet there are some professions like veterinary medicine that we really need to try and relax that and get some provincial support for expanding our class sizes.
And Karen, Jeffrey mentioned telehealth. Are there other innovations in how you deliver care that can allow you to see more patients?
I don't know, to be honest.
Clone yourself.
Yeah, well, I think that's it. Is the type of medicine that we practice is high touch. We are a part of the family's, veterinary care. It's important for us to have that time with the clients. I think the education piece is critical, and we are able to assess the patient, we're able to make a diagnosis, but in many cases the care is delivered at home, and that requires communication, that requires education, and I don't know how you cut back on that in a way that actually ensures that the pets are going to be cared properly.
And Jeffrey, we talked at the very beginning that this is something that was happening before the pandemic. Trying to figure out solutions to move forward. What worries you the most about this shortage in the province?
Certainly, loss of our healthcare professionals from the industry, either temporarily or permanently, is my biggest concern. These individuals have invested a huge amount into their training, as we have, and to lose them from the profession is a real tragedy. And yet we do need and cannot underestimate the emotional toll that this work brings. I think people certainly don't appreciate the difficulties encountered by veterinarians in their day-to-day work, and so we have to really work hard to try and help that situation, and we are.
And where would you say in the province have the shortages been the most severe?
Well, traditionally, we used to say that there was a real shortage in rural and remote areas, and those shortages remain and have got significantly worse over these years. So they're always differentially affected. But now there is just no part of the province at all that isn't affected by this. We are quite concerned about our ability to provide veterinarians to rural and remote areas. So for farm animals and horses, but even for small urban centers. Places like Sudbury and Thunder Bay, I've got many impassioned pleas from animal owners and veterinarians in those regions saying, we are really struggling. We can't even maintain our practices at half the capacity they should be. So those areas in the north in particular need special attention.
Do you see a way of getting more vets up there?
Yes, certainly we have a very successful model that was used a couple of decades ago for the Northern Ontario School of Medicine, whereby if we can come up with a program that attracts candidates from the north, that as much as possible training occurs in the north, they do their placements and externships in the north, and incentives are provided for them to stay in the north. Those things actually work, and we have ample evidence to show this sort of thing works. So we're working on plans to try and implement that kind of partnership in the future.
I'm not asking you to look into a crystal ball, but I'm just wondering if you can maybe give us a guess on how long you think these shortages will be happening in the province.
I have been told by our number crunchers at the Ontario Veterinary Medical Association that the current demographic trends and trends in pet ownership suggest that we're going to be stuck in this shortage until at least 2040.
And Karen, I'll give you the last 45 seconds. I asked Jeff the same question. What worries you the most about the current shortage of vets in this province?
I think on our side, the fact that we're going to see pets that are not able to receive the care they need. We're not going to be able to respond to their issues in a timely fashion. And I think that's going to be very difficult for the pet families, and I think it's crushing for the veterinary team members.
Well, Karen and Jeffrey, thank you so much for spending some time with us and giving us an overview of this problem, and hopefully something can be done to address it. We really do appreciate your insights. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You're very welcome.
Across the province, COVID-19 has been the dominant story for most of this year, but it's by no means been the only story. Our Ontario Hub's journalists have brought us many others from near and far. Here with a roundup and a look ahead, in the nation's capital, Ontario Hub's editor Sarah Trick. In Hamilton, Ontario, Justin Chandler, who covers the Hamilton-Niagara region, and in Ontario's capital city, Ashley Okwuosa, TVO's diversity and inclusion reporter. Welcome to you all.
Thank you, Jan.
Thank you. So it's very rare that we have all three of you, so it's really nice to see all of you here. I want to start with Ashley. Is there a story you've reported on this year that struck a chord with either you or your audience?
Yes, and it was a COVID-related story. So earlier this summer, I actually reported on the closure of the Ontario Correctional Institute in Brampton, which was one of the first correctional institutes in the province to close as a result of a COVID-19 outbreak. And actually, it's still closed. It closed in April of 2020, and it's still closed. I was told that the earliest opening date for this facility is, spring 2023, apparently. And I think what really struck me, and maybe some of the readers during my reporting, was just how precautionary measures that are so commonplace now, like masking and social distancing, according to the people that I spoke to, weren't properly enforced then. So I think that it's just really interesting to see how things have developed over time. The story also highlighted things like, how to prevent outbreaks like this in correctional facilities in the future. So topics like decarceration and vaccination rates were also brought up. So.
Sarah, you joined us a number of times on the program this year. What stories stood out to you?
Well, Jan, there was one that was very close to my heart because it was very personal for me. And it was one that I wrote highlighting Carleton University's attendant services program. I attended the program when I was going to university. And what it does is it provides attendant care for help with activities of daily living to students living in residence. It shut down when the university shut down, but when campus reopened, it didn't return. So I was able to highlight how that has affected its clients' lives, their educational prospects, even their ability to access care, because responsibility has been downloaded onto the families, which has been very difficult for them. So I felt very honored to be able to highlight that on the program and on the website.
Justin, I'm going to come to you. Were there any other notable stories that you did coming out of the Hamilton-Niagara region that you think that we should be revisiting?
Definitely, yeah. One of the big themes that I think I covered in a lot of my reporting this year was the intersection between inequality and COVID-19. And this has manifested itself throughout the province, but in Hamilton quite starkly, where certain areas had much higher vaccination rates and much lower infection rates as opposed to other areas. And so one story in particular I thought of spawned out of a discussion that you and I actually had about an apartment outbreak in the city, which we were able to discuss on the agenda. And it was about an effort that people were trying to push for to bring vaccines to where people were living to make it easier for them to be able to get them. And it's actually something that over time, public health has started to adopt in a way that they call micro-targeting, where they're bringing vaccines to where people are at rather than asking them to come to mass clinics.
Now, it wasn't just doom and gloom in terms of the reporting throughout the year. We did have a little bit of fun on TVO.org and for the Ontario Hubs. We did a bit of a summer series, and Justin, I know this is a bit of a sore spot for you. We were talking about the Ontario landmarks and highlighting them. The Hamilton Gas Globe, which you had written about, did not win. It was Big Bruce. Tell us about sort of the stories that came out of there and sort of what you learned.
Yeah, I'm still a little bit raw about that, but I did really appreciate learning about all sorts of different landmarks throughout Ontario. I think that the really fun thing was that everybody put a ton of effort into this. So it wasn't just like, here's this cool landmark, but people found the human stories behind them and sort of why these things existed and what they meant to people. And then we also had a lot of fun trash talking one another on Twitter and in real life. And, eventually I had to give it up to Big Bruce. The winner was a fierce competitor and, just a very majestic barnyard animal.
It's amazing to think just in 2 weeks that we will begin 2022. It's been quite a long year for a lot of people, but I'm hoping we can talk a little bit about what stories we're looking into next year. Ashley, is there anything you're following into the new year that we can look, for from you?
Yeah, of course. So in November of this year, actually, 40 Canadian post-secondary institutions signed something called the Scarborough Charter. And it's been described as the first national action plan to tackle anti-Black racism in higher education. So this charter focuses on addressing anti-Black racism by removing structural barriers. And this includes everything from increasing equity in governance, improving sort of recruitment of Black staff and Black students, and then even sort of supporting the emergence of Black Canadian studies programs. So I think it's going to be really interesting to look at how these goals are achieved across institutions in the province, because, all institutions are kind of at different places when it comes to how they handle race on campus.
Sarah, I want to come to you. When we talk about 2022, I know we're probably going to be talking about the Ottawa LRT at some point, whether it's the good or the bad, but is there anything that you're looking at also into the new year when we talk about Ottawa?
Broadly, and this is more of a provincial story than an Ottawa story, but broadly, equity for disabled and chronically ill people. I'm thinking about rollout of boosters, and whether disabled people will be prioritized. I'm thinking about as remote work was rolled out more and more during COVID, people with disabilities had more of an opportunity to enter the workforce, including myself, and I'm going to be monitoring whether or not that's rolled back, and if it is, what we can do about it.
And Justin, I'll come to you. How about the Hamilton-Niagara region? What can we expect from you next year?
So certainly one of the biggest local stories here has been the urban boundary review in Hamilton, trying to decide which way it wants to go in accordance to Ontario's growth plan, whether it's going to be expanding the urban boundary and gobbling up some farmland in order to grow, or growing more inwards and upwards. And that's the decision that council ended up making, the inwards and upwards one. But it still remains to be seen what the staff plan is going to be. That's coming in January. And there's also been some discussion, as our colleague John Michael McGrath has written about for the website, as to whether the Ontario government will actually allow Hamilton to do this, or whether it's going to impose its own direction. So this is a story that will have massive effects in Hamilton, how the place develops, on housing affordability, and just what the general timbre of the city is going to be like in the coming years.
We do have a couple of minutes left, and I'm curious, sort of, with us heading into the new year, talking about sort of the challenges of being, reporters in a pandemic. Ashley, can you talk to us a little bit about what that's been like? Stories, quite a variety of stories, lots of different sources. You were in studio with me talking about migrant workers and sort of that. What have been the challenges of reporting during a pandemic?
I think getting to know my sources, who have been so kind to pick up the phone and talk to me. But because of my role, reporting on diversity, equity, inclusion, I'm trying to report across the province and talking to people in the GTA, in Southwestern Ontario and Eastern Ontario, and trying to get people on the phone, and also trying to hopefully convey as much as I can, through phone interviews or Skype interviews or Zoom interviews. I think it's been a little challenging, but I think we've all had those same issues. But I hope that the new year will probably bring more face-to-face interactions.
Sarah, anything to add on top of that in terms of sort of challenges reporting during the pandemic over the last 2 years, really?
It's difficult to write stories when you're in them. We've all been living through this pandemic for 2 years, and yet we still have to write about it every day in our work, edit copies about it, do updates about it. So it really feels in some ways like the pandemic has been our whole lives, and that's been very challenging. There's also been a lot of opportunity that comes with that, but it has been a bit of a grind. So I'm hoping that there'll be opportunities to do stories that aren't related to the pandemic and to expand our lives in ways that it's just not this huge, overwhelming, all-consuming thing.
Justin, I'm going to give you the last word on this.
Well, I concur with what the other two said, but I'd also add it's been a challenge throughout the pandemic, dealing with misinformation, and a lot of reporters have had to be dealing with harassment as well from people online who haven't liked to hear the things that they're reporting. And so I think that that's something that as an industry we're trying to deal with. And then that's going to be very important going forward to see how we as newsrooms and as individuals can react to that.
Thank you very much. I know this is probably the last time that I will see all three of you in the year 2021. So I want to wish you guys a happy holidays and a happy new year, and we will see you again next year.
See you next year.
Thanks, same to you.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
The agenda this week checked in on how the pandemic has influenced our eating habits, surveyed the growing presence of e-bikes on Ontario roadways, reflected on 20 years since the first iPod, and considered how music is helping people get through these trying times. The agenda's Week in Review starts with Ontario's handling of pandemic relief spending.
Was it necessary for the government to suspend the normal due diligence it does before shoveling money out the door?
It was necessary to get the money out the door. I'm not certain that the oversight was there at all, even contemplated. But there was other things that the AG talked about in terms of lack of consultation of the people who were going to get the money, who needed the money from certain industries that were frankly left out of the cold. So this was a rush job because the provincial government had spent so much time finger pointing at the feds, hoping that they would do it. And the feds were finger pointing at the province, hoping they would do it. And at the end of it all, too many people, families, individuals, businesses kept getting left out in the cold. Were there some challenges of oversight? Sure. But there was also just problems with how the program was set up in the first place. And that needs to be looked at going forward because this isn't going anywhere anytime soon.
Deb Matthews, just before I get you to comment, apparently one of your Liberal Eastern Ontario MPPs, Amanda Simard, is a big fan of Oprah. because her comment was, the PC government is a bit, well, a terrible version of Oprah with taxpayers' money is the way she put it. She said, you get a grant, you get a grant. Outside of Ontario, you get a grant. You're not eligible? Whatever, you get a grant anyway. Everybody gets a grant. Okay, that's pretty funny, but is that really a fair characterization of what went on here?
Well, Steve, when as I read the AG report, half of the money that went to ineligible companies, half the money. There's something very seriously wrong. And, you know, there are a whole bunch of things to talk about here. I'm sure we'll get to them all, but let's just focus on the timeline for a minute. On December 17th, the then Minister Rod Phillips, gave instructions to the ministry on setting up the criteria. 2 days later, the 19th of December, it was submitted to Treasury Board. And 2 days later, December 21st, it was announced. That is so ridiculously speedy. And then when you think about the timeline of the finance minister being on his vacation in St. Bart's, he was away when this was happening. So I think there are some serious questions about competence and about rushing it out the door. You know, when you send money to companies that don't operate in Ontario, when, as I say, half the money goes to ineligible companies, and then you make the decision that you're not going to try to collect, you're just going to write it off.
Well, hold off on that. We're gonna come back to whether they should have gone to get it. But I want to ask you a follow-up, because I think you were president of the Treasury Board once upon a time in this province.
Yes,
So you just put a timeline forward that basically says between idea and out the door, it's 4 days.
4 days.
In your judgment, based on your experience, I guess a two-part question. How long should that take if everybody's doing due diligence? And do you have any sympathy for the speed with which they had to make decisions here, given the nature of the emergency?
They had to make decisions. They had to make them quickly, but they took everything at face value. They had no criteria. It was a very poor job with an absent minister.
Mitch, a poor job with an absent minister. Fair characterization?
No, I don't really think so. I think Ontarians needed that relief, and they needed it quickly. I mean, I think the former minister will recall when she was in office, there was an ice storm in 2013, 2014, and the government chose to give relief money back in the form of gift cards, and those went to people who were not eligible as well. The reality is that you have to put yourself in the shoes of the business owner. If you are facing a real risk to your livelihood, a chance that your business may not survive, you apply for the program. And if the government made a wrong decision on eligibility, which the auditor pointed out many other businesses should have been eligible, then this is a way to fix that eligibility, is to continue to hand out the money to those businesses, even if they don't meet the parameters of the program. So I would think of it more as, yes, it was a quick job to get it out the door. They just made those other policy changes while the program was operational, rather than waiting to get them right before the program started, because he needed to get that money into people's pockets immediately.
Your predecessors didn't do $1 billion in gift cards, though. This is big dollars. Does that matter?
Yeah, but I would just say, I mean, you know, I've heard some comparisons about $1 billion in gas plants. You know, to me, the idea is that the scandal on the previous government was giving money to insiders and friends, and the scandal on the Conservative government is giving money back to taxpayers. We're really talking about a government giving too much money back to its own businesses in the time of crisis. I think if you asked the Premier, if you asked Premier Ford that this program was going to cost $1 billion more than he thought, but it would keep businesses afloat, he would have said, great, let's put an extra $1 billion in the program, because that's what we really needed to do, was make sure that those businesses were going to be able to survive the pandemic.
There's so much more control of being able to cook at home. And I think that people are realizing that. I mean, when you ask somebody who bakes, well, why do you go through the hassle of baking your own bread when you can walk out to the store and pay, $2 or $3 for a loaf of bread that's ready to go? And people, inevitably, the number one reason is so that I know what is in my food. So I think that is just being able to say, I know that this
dish has this, and this. And for some people, it's like, and all of these ingredients are all local ingredients. And I think that is something that people are finding really a lot more important than they ever thought, because it's not, yes, it started as a climate change issue, but it's become a point of supporting your community, supporting the local economy, supporting our country, whether it's, you have, meat from Alberta, or you have vegetables from Nova Scotia, or, whatever you're buying. If you know that it comes from at least our country, you feel better about it. And again, if you can afford to make those choices, I think there's a lot more people making those choices today than they ever did before.
Josh and I saw you nodding.
Yes, definitely. This is exactly, we are seeing this and understanding that not everybody, as Marian said, is able to make this choice. But if you are, these choices count, I think, more than they ever did before. So I cannot encourage this thinking. And yes, it is a little bit more effort. Yes, it is perhaps less convenient. But I think we are really getting a sense of what the comfort and convenience is costing us. Right? This is sort of part of the issue here. And so for paying attention to local eating and considering the community of people around you is got to be close to everybody's top of list.
But how do we break that habit of like eating food that's off season? I think a lot of us have become accustomed to eating, I don't know, raspberries from California in the dead of winter. How do we change that habit, Joshna?
I think one is to really rethink what seasonal eating is all about, because the way I see it and the way I like to tell people is like, when it's strawberry season, I am all strawberries all the time, right? And it is indulgence, and they are beautiful and gorgeous, and I eat my fill until they're gone and something else happens, right? And then it's stone fruits, and then it's peaches, and and then it goes on and on like this. And so enjoy the rhythm of the passing seasons, right? Those poor out of season raspberries are so sour and pitiful, right? They don't, the melons, they hurt your mouth, the pineapples leave, don't do it. Don't. And when I see them, I'm like, I just want to apologize in the grocery store. I'm like, I'm so sorry, the journey you took to get here, and you haven't even been able to be your fullest self. You know what I mean? It's a real sadness. So let the melon have its moment to be the best version of itself, and then move along to something else. If you're desperate for it, maybe think about a local frozen option, because we've got lots of that here in Ontario. But really, really think about the fact that seasonal eating is about wild indulgence until you move on to the next thing, right? So right now we're getting serious about our apples. That's our wild indulgence right now.
I'm laughing because I have strawberries in my fridge right now.
But they're sad, right? Aren't they so sad?
They are. They're pretty sad.
Best version of themselves, exactly.
Marian, I want to ask you that same question. Yeah.
I mean, there's also, efforts to have hothouse grown. I mean, I was so happy last year, or time is so fluid these days. Maybe it was longer than that, when I was able to buy Ontario-grown strawberries in December. And I thought, is this a freak of nature? But they were delicious. And I caught them because I could smell them before I saw them. And I think that is something that is, being able to grow things locally in hothouse situations that are perhaps out of season. But more to break the habit is, the supply chain issue and products that are slower to come. I think that that's going to force people's hands. As a lot of the, as Josh was saying, it takes 21 days to break a habit. So if we're now in almost year 2, completing year 2, I think the habits are being set in stone, and we are going to be eating very differently for the next foreseeable future.
Do e-bikes replace traditional bicycles or cars?
Right. I mean, there's been actually quite a few studies from across North America and Europe that show that people are more likely to replace a car trip with an e-bike trip than they are to replace a car trip with a trip by a traditional bicycle. And, that really makes sense when you look at the, extra assist that you can get to carry groceries or climb that hill to your kid's school. So, they really can be this alternative to driving if in terms of climate change and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. If people are trying to get vehicle trips off the road, e-bikes can really present a real solution to that. But as you alluded to, and as Darnell has mentioned, they can be fairly cost prohibitive. In terms of you're not always replacing a car with an e-bike. So if you were thinking of buying, a car versus a $15,000 e-bike, maybe there's a good price balance there, but not everybody who's thinking about riding an e-bike is trying to replace out a car purchase. And that's why several jurisdictions around the world have actually started looking at various types of rebates to help people buy e-bikes and bikes and address that price barrier.
We're going to touch on rebates a little in a little bit, but Darnell, Jamie mentioned climate change. How do e-bikes play into the climate change crisis?
They can certainly affect our climate change pathways in a couple of ways. One, certainly they replace vans quite capably so long as you're using a micro-hub system. And that really just allows us to be able to have, efficient transportation at scale, and transportation counts to a number of emissions. One, as we're thinking more about ecological footprint, it takes a lot more resources, lithium ion, for example, to have a car, because you're moving a lot of metal, not just yourself and your goods as well. So it's much better for the environment to actually use e-bikes and lighter mobility modes instead, as well as it is also significantly less drain on the power supply when it comes to charging. You don't need special charging ports. You can simply plug it into a wall outlet and be off very easily a couple of hours later, or instantly if you have a spare battery, for example. So certainly it can make a huge difference. And it also makes a difference when people see these mobility tools and they say, yes, we feel this fits our lives. We can find a way to run our business, have our family be moved around, do whatever needs to be done on that e-bike instead.
And Jamie, I think we realized this when the pandemic initially hit, our need to be outside. A lot of people went outside. I think for a while, you couldn't even find a bicycle. They were all sold out. So many people cycle because they enjoy it, but it's also a form of exercise. Do you lose that when you're riding an e-bike?
Great question. And absolutely not. Riding an e-bike is still a wonderful form of exercise. And there's been research that has shown that, sometimes I think in the beginning, especially in North America, e-bikes were characterized as, cheating. And certainly, the question is cheating at what? Unless you're, racing in the Tour de France, where time really matters, and you're, running daily errands, going to school, going to the grocery store, it's not really cheating. It's getting around. And, we know that e-bikes can actually help people cycle for trips that they would otherwise not be cycling for, and provide them with more opportunities for exercise. But also studies show that people on e-bikes, myself included, are riding further, and actually, also increasing their exercise by doing that too. So riding an e-bike can definitely be a way of getting exercise and staying healthy, although we know that's not always the main purpose. Sometimes it's just about getting from point A to point B.
You can't talk about the iPod without talking about iTunes. iTunes was presented to the record industry by Steve Jobs at a time when everybody was dying because of file trading and piracy. And the record labels could not get together to do anything as a group, because that would have violated antitrust rules. So they needed an outside person to come in to provide a storefront digital solution for selling music this way, as a way of meeting customer demand, and also as a way of combating privacy. So with iTunes, what you had originally was just something that would rip CDs. Then it became the store. And one of the things about the store was albums were deconstructed into their individual tracks. Not all of them at first, but most of them. So rather than buying an entire album for whatever the price might be, $10.99, $12.99, or so on, you could buy just the songs you wanted. And this was a really big deal because if you remember back to the late 1990s, the big criticism was we were getting albums with one or two good songs on it, and the rest was junk. At the same time, the recorded music industry was phasing out the single. So you couldn't just buy the one song that you wanted, as we had been doing since the dawn of recorded music. So what we saw was Apple, through iTunes, using the iPod, deconstructing or heralding the end of the traditional album, because you no longer had to buy all those records. Or all those songs you didn't want. You could just buy the songs you wanted, and that has put us on the road to streaming, where it's not about the album anymore; it's about individual songs. That's the biggest thing that iTunes and the iPod did.
I get that, and I guess that is a brave step forward for consumer choice, and obviously only paying for what you want. But on the flip side, I wonder if there was a downside to that, namely, when you bought the album, you might sort of accidentally bump into a song that you didn't know about, but that, as it turns out, you actually love, and it becomes part of the soundtrack of your life. There's less of a chance of that happening now. Isn't that the case?
I totally, completely agree. I mean, earlier this year, we had a situation with Adele, who demanded that Spotify remove the shuffle option, or at least cripple the shuffle option on her album, because the whole thing was meant to be listened to in a certain order as a whole. And that has been the way it's been for a lot of records. I mean, we think about all the concept records that we started getting in the 1960s all the way through to today. That is essentially a little mini opera where you're supposed to follow the libretto and everything has to be unfolded in a specific order. It's really difficult to imagine anybody making an album like Pink Floyd's The Wall or Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band or even Green Day's American Idiot today, because those are pieces of art that are meant to be consumed as a whole, not by the individual tracks, which is one of the sad things about the demise of the album. I think the album is still the currency of the recorded music industry, and it's still by which so many things are measured, including things like awards programs and so on. But we're starting to really see the album lose currency in favor of individual songs. You know, the hip hop community has got this really figured out. You drip songs out, and you don't wait 2-3 years between albums, or you put out an EP, or you put out a mixtape. It's all about making sure that your audience is serviced on a regular and timely basis, rather than the old model of, like U2, for example, will put out an album, tour behind it for 4 years, and then disappear for another 2.
One of the things we really needed music to do for us over the past 19 months in particular is to help us through the loneliness and the isolation of a COVID-19 pandemic in ways that were even more dramatic than say, music usually performs that role for us. Can you help us understand the role you think music played in that regard?
Yeah, I think it was huge for staying connected. And I think we often think of listening to music as kind of a solitary activity, but it's always connective, even if you're just connecting sort of one-sided to the artist you're listening to. I think it has been a huge source of comfort and bonding even with the people already in your circle, with other people just, posting a song to their Instagram stories. I'm one of those people that actually clicks through and listens, and it can just open up the world to new forms of connection.
So, Mika, was music even more important in the last 19 months than otherwise as it relates to isolation, loneliness, that kind of thing?
Absolutely. It makes me think of, there's like this psychotherapy exercise where it says name 10 things you can see, 10 things you can feel, 10 things you can smell. And for me, it was name 10 songs you can listen to. What are 10 songs you like? It was a way of maintaining a sense of normalcy, for sure.
Elamine, how about you on that?
I guess I found myself, evoking space a lot as I was listening to music. As new albums came out, I started thinking about what would this album sound like in a room full of crowded people? What would it sound like as if I'm just like driving past a place or walking past a place and they're blasting these songs of this album? So for me, I sort of went to that imagining place. Like, I can't imagine the Doja Cat album like not on the, the dance floor of some kind of club somewhere. It's really hard for me to imagine that. And so like listening to that solitarily made me have to go to like the imaginative space of saying, okay, where will this album actually sound best? What is this album designed to do? And that was strangely like a really warm, connective experience in the sense that you start thinking about outside of your immediate sort of environment.
Elamine, maybe follow up with this, and I'm really not trying to sound like all three of your fathers here, but but when I was your age, we used to do things called making a mixtape for somebody, and it was on a cassette. This is before CDs, and I gather nowadays you guys do this like Spotify blend feature or something where you all make playlists and then share playlists with each other. How I mean, I guess is it the same phenomenon basically as making a mixtape, Elamine?
Yeah, the same phenomenon, just way easier than you had it, Steve. So, we just have to add a playlist, add a song to, a playlist that you want. And so, like, I found myself, like, making playlists for some friends who are going through tough times, making playlists for friends who are saying, you know what, I've never heard of this artist. Can you get me into them? Can you figure out a way for me to get into them? And I was like, yes, of course, I can do that for you. I have a friend named Allie who, she's a runner, and she has been inviting me to constantly sort of make her running playlists, and I like get a lot of joy out of doing that. And it's just a way of saying, you know what, I took 25 minutes to think about you and think about an order of songs and then send them to you because I think these songs should play a role in your life. The songs are the vehicle, but the connection is the point, of course.
That's just some of what we covered this week on The Agenda. For more, including the full conversations, you can visit our website, tvo.org, our YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda, or our Twitter feed, twitter.com/theagenda. And that's it for this Friday, December 17th, 2021. The Art Gallery of Ontario got creative during this pandemic. Monday, we'll find out how they're delivering arts education virtually to every corner of the province. Also, Steve talks to the author of a new book on Flora MacDonald, the first woman to take a serious run at becoming Prime Minister of Canada. I'm Nam Kiwanuka. Thank you for watching TVO and for joining us online at tvo.org. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you again on Monday.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism. Ontario Hubs are made possible by the Barry and Laurie Green Family Charitable Trust and Goldie Feldman.